My father taught me three things. 1. Always wave to your neighbors. 2. Keep your lawn greener than theirs. And 3. The most dangerous secrets look just like normal life. His name is Robert Mackenzie. Everyone calls him Mac. He's the president of the Pinecrest Glen HOA, the coach of the travel soccer team, and the reason our suburb has the lowest crime rate in the county. They think he's just a good guy with a talent for fixing problems. He is. But the problems he fixes aren't broken sprinklers. I didn't mean to find out. I was just looking for the spare keys to my car. What I found was a map. Our neighborhood. Every house marked, not with names, with codes, amounts, delivery schedules. The Andersons' monthly donation for their quiet divorce. The prescription Dr. Lee renewed for the miller's son. The security fee from the new family on Oak Drive. Now I sit at this table, and I know. The dad who checks my homework is a kingpin. Our happy home is a headquarters, and every friendly wave from our neighbors is a transaction. The first rule of our family is loyalty. The second rule is you don't talk about the business. I'm about to break both. Before we start the story, please tell me about the story in the end, or wherever you left. Just tell me why you are leaving, what you want me to improve about the stories. Even if you don't like the story, just let me know why you don't like the story. I will be very thankful to you. Now let's move towards the story. The devil isn't in the details. He's in the spreadsheets. The key wasn't even hidden. That was the genius of it, and my first real lesson in my father's operational security. Hide something too well, people go looking for it. Leave it in plain sight, but make it boring, and it becomes invisible. The key to the locked drawer in my father's garage workbench hung on a pegboard alongside 24 nearly identical keys, labeled in his precise architect's handwriting. Sprinkler shed, attic fan, winter patio cushions. This one said, tax files, 2018-2019. I wasn't snooping. I was genuinely looking for my car key. My old Honda Civic ate them like breath mints. My mother suggested, with the serene frustration of someone who hasn't touched a garage tool in a decade, that Dad might have spares in his organized chaos out back. The garage was a cathedral of suburban masculinity, neat, dust-free, smelling of cut grass and synthetic motor oil. Tools hung in outlined silhouettes on the wall. The workbench was clear, save for a vintage turntable, softly playing the Eagles, my father's sanctuary. I hated it in there. It felt like a stage set for a man I only vaguely recognized. My eye scanned the pegboard. No Honda. My hand, brushing over the keys, stopped on the cold steel of the tax file's key. A tiny, irrational thought slithered through me. What if my car key fell in that drawer? It was impossible. The drawer was always locked. But the thought, once born, had a heartbeat. I took the key. It slid into the polished brass lock with a sound like a sigh. The drawer didn't stick. It rolled open on perfect ball-bearing slides. No car keys. No tax files. There was a single, green, hardbound ledger, the kind you'd see in an old library. Next to it, a current model smartphone, black, no case, powered off. I should have closed the drawer. I know that now. The part of me that was still Robert Mackenzie's daughter. Chloe, who got straight A's. Chloe, who ran cross-country. The good girl, screamed to close it, lock it, and forget the shape of that key in my palm. But there was another part. A quieter, colder part that had watched for years, as our perfect life felt increasingly like a beautifully painted set wall. You could lean on it, but there was nothing behind it. That part reached out and touched the ledger's cover. The pages were not paper. They were a smooth, waterproof synthetic. The entries were not in my father's handwriting. They were printed in a clean, generic font. It was a list. Our street, Pinecrest Lane, ran down the left margin like a spine. My blood went to sludge. I knew these people. Mrs. Anderson was getting a divorce. She always wore a smile so bright it looked painful. Dr. Lee, the cardiologist, was prescribing for the Miller's College kid, the kid who totaled his BMW last spring but somehow had no record. Delivery, GC. Garage cash. DM, direct mail. T, Tuesday. I flipped a page. More streets, more codes. Security upgrade was a recurring charge. Landscaping bonus. HOA fee waiver. Then my own address, Mackenzie. The entry was different. Family unit. The words looked clinical, like we were components in a system. I traced the letters with a fingertip. Below our entry was a sublist. They were assessing me. My father was assessing me. I was an asset with potential. My friendship with Ashley Miller was a note. My life, my routine, was a profile. The sound of the garage door opener was a thunderclap. I slammed the drawer shut, fumbling the key. It clattered on the concrete floor. The heavy rumble of my father's Ford Expedition filled the space. I snatched the key, jammed it onto its peg, and spun around, my back against the workbench, just as the interior door from the house opened. My mother walked in, carrying a basket of laundry. "Chloe, did you find it?" I couldn't speak. My throat was sealed shut. I shook my head. She nodded, heading for the laundry nook. "Ask your father. He's pulling in now." The big SUV crunched to a halt. The driver's door opened. My father emerged, not in his usual weekend polo, but in a crisp, light blue dress shirt, sleeves rolled once. He'd been at his real office downtown. He looked tired, but his eyes, when they landed on me, sharpened instantly. It was a scan, not a glance. "Hey, kiddo, what's up?" He grabbed his briefcase from the passenger seat. "Car key," I managed, the words croaking out. "Lost it." "Again?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They flicked over my shoulder, to the pegboard, to the workbench, then back to me. A full diagnostic in 2 seconds. "Check the bowl by the front door. That's where the gremlins put them." He walked toward me, his footsteps echoing. He stopped at the sink to wash his hands, his back to me. "You okay? You look pale." "Fine," I said too quickly. "Just frustrated." He dried his hands on a clean towel, then turned, leaning against the sink. The posture was casual, but he was now between me and the exit. "This garage is a mess." "Huh?" "Need to reorganize these keys." His gaze drifted past me, again to the pegboard. A long, silent beat. "You know, some of these open things you shouldn't mess with." Old files, boring adult stuff. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a calibration. He was testing the atmospheric pressure in the room. Yeah, I breathed. Boring. He studied me for another eternity. Then the warm, public smile finally clicked on. Come on, help me unload some groceries. Your mother's making her famous lasagna for the block watch potluck tomorrow. The rest of the day was a high-definition nightmare. Dinner was a performance. I watched my father, the maestro. He asked my mother about her garden club with genuine interest. He teased me about a boy in my physics class. The perfect, gentle dad joke. He talked about a zoning issue he was helping old Mr. Henderson with down the street. A zoning issue. I wondered what the code for that was in the ledger. Every laugh felt like a lie. Every passing of the salad was a transaction. I saw our family not as three people, but as a diagram. Him, the control node. Her, the unknowing insulator, providing perfect cover. Me, the unassessed asset. That night, I lay in bed, the house silent. The map of our neighborhood was burned on the back of my eyelids. I didn't see houses. I saw terminals, clients, delivery points. Our home, the central server. I heard a soft creak in the hallway. A shadow passed under my door, not heading to my parents' room, heading downstairs, to the garage. I counted to 100, my heart a frantic bird in a cage. Then I slid out of bed and crept to my window, which overlooked the driveway. The interior garage light was on, a faint golden square on the asphalt. I saw my father's silhouette. He was at the workbench. The drawer was open. He stood perfectly still, looking down into it. Not moving, just auditing. After 5 minutes, he closed the drawer. He didn't immediately lock it. He picked up something small from the bench, the key, and pressed it into a lump of gray putty stuck underneath the lip of the bench. Then he locked the drawer and placed the key back on its peg. He didn't leave. He walked to the center of the garage, turned in a slow circle, his eyes sweeping the space, looking for disturbances, for evidence of an intrusion. His gaze passed over my dark window. I froze, though I knew he couldn't see me. He was protecting his kingdom, and I had just become its greatest internal threat. The next day was the block watch potluck. Our backyard was transformed into a pamphlet version of America. Checkered tablecloths, citronella candles, my father in an apron that said Grill Sergeant, flipping burgers. I was on lemonade duty, a job that let me stand still and watch. I saw it all now, the ecosystem. I saw Mrs. Anderson hand my father a sealed envelope with a brittle smile. For the Community Beautification Fund, Mac. He slipped it into his apron pocket without looking, gave her shoulder a squeeze. Retainer, $15,000. Monthly, $2,500. I saw Dr. Lee approach, clap my father on the back. They talked in low tones near the fence. My father nodded, took a small, folded piece of paper from the doctor, and tucked it behind the grill's propane tank. Oxy 80 milligrams. Monthly allotment, 120 units. Ashley Miller came over to refill her drink. Your dad is the best, she said, giggling. He literally saved my brother's life last year. Got him into that crazy expensive rehab in Arizona. My parents think he walks on water. Expungement file. Service fee, $7,500. Yeah, I said, the lemonade pitcher trembling in my hand. He's a real hero. My father's laugh boomed across the yard. He raised his iced tea. To Pinecrest Glen, the safest little corner of the world, because we look out for each other. A cheer went up. Glasses clinked. He caught my eye across the crowd. His smile remained unwavering. But in that fraction of a second, the message was clear. A private transmission on a shielded frequency. You see it now. This is how it works. This is what we protect. I felt a new, terrifying understanding crystallize inside me. I wasn't just living in a lie. I was part of the infrastructure. Knowing the truth is a disease. It makes you see symptoms in everything. A friendly wave becomes a status report. A dropped-off casserole feels like a payment. You start checking the locks on your own mind. The potluck was Sunday. By Tuesday, the silence in my own head was deafening. I moved through school, AP government, chemistry, cross-country practice, like a ghost haunting my own life. My friends' chatter about college apps and weekend parties sounded like dialogue from a play I'd been abruptly written out of. I kept waiting for the confrontation, for my father to pull me aside, his warm eyes gone cold, and say, "We need to talk about what you saw." It never came. Instead, he deployed a different, more subtle tactic. Normalization. Monday night, as I was supposedly doing calculus homework, he knocked and entered without waiting, holding 2 glasses of ice water. "Thought you might be thirsty. Cranking hard on those derivatives?" He set a glass down, his eyes scanning my textbook, my notepad, the open tabs on my laptop, all legitimately math-related. It was a spot check, disguised as paternal care. "Yeah," I mumbled, not looking up. "Tough chapter." He lingered, leaning against my doorframe. "You seemed quiet at the potluck. Everything okay with Ashley? With the team?" The question was a trap. It invited me to confide. To give him data about my emotional state, my social stability. Asset C, Chloe. Status, anomalous. Investigate. "Just tired," I said, deploying the universal teen shield. "Lots of homework." He nodded, his gaze finally leaving me to wander around my room. The posters, the bookshelf, the track medals. As if he was seeing it for the first time. Or the last. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right, Bug?" He hadn't called me that since I was 12. The old nickname felt like a probe. "Anything at all. The world's a complicated place. I'm here to help you navigate it." Navigate it. Like it's a terrain he controls. Which I now knew he literally did. "I know, Dad. Thanks." He gave me a smile that was supposed to be soft, but felt surgical and left. The silence he left behind was heavier. He wasn't threatening me. He was reinforcing the perimeter, reminding me of my place within his system, the protected, oblivious daughter. My job was to stay in my lane, to be the high-visibility, low-risk asset. By not acknowledging the ledger, he was forcing me to live in the version of reality he'd constructed. It was psychological gaslighting with a smile. The next test came Wednesday. My mother, her blonde bob perfectly sleek, handed me a sealed, cream-colored envelope at breakfast. "Sweetie, be a darling and drop this off at the Lee's on your way to school. It's an invitation to my gallery opening next week." The envelope felt inert in my hand, just paper. But my mind screamed codes. Hashtag 8 Lee P Pharma, Oxy 80 milligrams. Can't you just text Dr. Lee? I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. My mother blinked, a tiny frown of confusion marring her perfect brow. It's a formal invitation, Chloe. It's polite, and you pass their house every day. She said it as if explaining gravity to a child. This was the ritual, the performance of neighborliness that greased the wheels of our world. My refusal would be an anomaly, a blip on the radar. My father, hidden behind the financial section of the newspaper, didn't lower it, but I felt his attention focus like a laser. The entire kitchen waited. Sure, Mom, I said, shoving the envelope into my backpack. The Lee's house was a modern masterpiece of glass and pale wood. As I walked up the immaculate stone path, my heart hammered against my ribs. I wasn't delivering an invitation. I was crossing a transactional boundary. I rang the bell. Dr. Lee answered, already in his white coat, stethoscope around his neck. He was a compact, intense man with kind eyes that now, to me, looked haunted. Chloe, good morning. His smile was quick, professional. Hi, Dr. Lee, from my mom. I thrust the envelope at him. Ah, the gallery show. We're looking forward to it. He took it, and for a fraction of a second, his eyes darted over my shoulder, scanning the street. It was the same diagnostic look my father had. A check of the environment. When his eyes met mine again, the kindness was back, but it was layered with something else, a wariness, an unspoken understanding. He knew I was Mac's daughter. I was part of the apparatus. Thank you for dropping this off. You tell your father I appreciated his help with that drainage issue last week. Drainage issue. The euphemism hung in the air between us, oily and unmistakable. I will, I whispered, already backing away. That afternoon, cross-country practice was my only escape. The burn in my lungs, the rhythm of my feet on the packed earth, it was pure, uncomplicated pain. No subtext. But even that was invaded. As I finished my cool-down lap on the track that circled the football field, I saw him. Deputy Mark Sweeney, one of the school resource officers, was leaning against his parked cruiser near the gate, aviator sunglasses hiding his eyes. He was a friend of my father's. They golfed. He gave talks in our civics class about community policing. As I walked towards the locker room, he pushed off the car. Chloe Mackenzie, pushing hard out there. I slowed, wiping sweat from my forehead. Trying to, Deputy Sweeney. He fell into step beside me. A casual, intimidating proximity. Your dad mentioned you might be a little stressed lately. Senior year, am I right? The pressure cooker. The air left my body. My father had talked to him about me. It's fine, I said, my voice flat. Yeah, well, you know. He lowered his voice, though there was no one nearby. This is a safe town, safest in the county. We like to keep it that way. That means everyone does their part. Good kids from good families, they keep their heads down, focus on the future. They don't get curious about things that don't concern them. You follow? It was a threat, wrapped in a badge and a folksy tone, but a crystalline threat. He knew, or my father had alerted him to a potential anomaly in Asset C. This was the second layer of the perimeter. Not just family, but the law itself. I follow, I said, meeting the reflection of my own terrified face in his sunglasses. Atta girl. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder, a gesture that felt like being stamped with a seal. You ever mean anything? You come to me. We look out for our own. Pause. I spent that night in a state of paralyzed clarity. The system wasn't just my father. It was a network. My mother, the unwitting concierge. Dr. Lee, a client and a node. Deputy Sweeney, the protective shell. The entire suburb was a collaborative fiction, a gilded cage where everyone played their role in exchange for safety, for solutions, for silence. And I had stumbled backstage. My rebellion started small. That Friday, I told my parents I was sleeping over at Ashley Miller's house to work on a history project. A normal, teenage lie. The first I'd ever told them that mattered. Instead, I took the 7:30 p.m. bus downtown. My hoodie pulled up. I needed to see the other side of the operation. The source. My father's architecture firm, Mackenzie and Associates, occupied the top 2 floors of a refurbished brick building on a street that was just on the edge of sketchy. It was after hours. The lights were off in his corner office on the 5th floor, but a dim, steady glow came from the ground floor. The retail space his firm owned but had never leased. The windows were frosted, but the door was a heavy, modern thing of steel and reinforced glass. A keypad lock glowed green. I lurked in a shadowed doorway across the street, feeling like a character in a bad spy movie. For an hour, nothing. I was about to leave, chilled and feeling foolish, when a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up quietly, no headlights. 2 men got out. They weren't suburban dads. They wore dark, functional clothes. One carried a slim, hard-sided briefcase. They didn't look at the keypad. One knocked a specific pattern on the steel door. Tap, 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 pause, tap. It opened inward, spilling a slice of yellow light onto the sidewalk. The man who opened it was my father. He wasn't in his dad costume. He wore dark trousers and a black sweater. His posture was different. Not the relaxed, open stance of Mac the neighbor, but something coiled, efficient. He exchanged a few words with the men, his face grave. The briefcase was handed to him. He opened it, just a crack, and checked the contents with a small flashlight. He nodded, then handed the man a thick, letter-sized envelope from inside his jacket. No handshakes. The entire exchange took less than 60 seconds. The men slid back into the sedan and melted into the night. My father stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the empty street. Then, his eyes, those laser blue eyes, swept across the darkness. They passed over my shadowed doorway. I held my breath, my blood roaring in my ears. His gaze didn't linger. He turned, went inside, and the steel door closed with a final, heavy thud that echoed in the silent street. I sank against the brick wall, trembling. I had seen the engine of the machine, the briefcase, the envelope. The men who weren't from Pinecrest Glen. This was the reality my father's barbecues and HOA meetings paid for. The bus ride home was a blur. I got back to Ashley's house by 10:30 p.m. My alibi intact. She was half asleep on the couch, scrolling on her phone. "Your project research get anything?" she mumbled. "Yeah," I said, my voice distant. "I got everything." I didn't sleep. I lay in Ashley's guest bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the cold, professional look on my father's face. That was the real Robert Mackenzie, the man in the garage, the kingpin. The father I knew was the mask, worn for my benefit and for the world. The following afternoon, back home, the final piece of the perimeter clicked into place. I was in the kitchen, making a sandwich, when my father came in from the garage. He washed his hands at the sink, then turned, leaning against the counter, watching me. "Good time at Ashley's?" he asked, his tone conversational. "It was fine. Project's done. That's my girl." He paused. "You know, I was downtown last night, finalizing some blueprints. Thought I saw someone who looked like you getting on a bus around 7:30. The kitchen walls seemed to shrink. The sound of the refrigerator hum grew deafening. He was giving me a chance to confess my minor teenage lie, to step back into my assigned role. He wasn't asking. He was telling me, "I see you." I met his gaze. For the first time, I didn't see my dad. I saw the man from the doorway, the man with the briefcase. I saw the ledger. "Must have been someone else," I said, my voice not wavering. "I was at Ashley's all night." A long, silent beat stretched between us. His expression didn't change, but something in the atmosphere solidified. The unspoken acknowledgement cast between us like a current. The game was now active. I had seen the truth, and he knew I'd seen it. I had just lied to his face, and he knew it was a lie. He smiled, slow and easy. It was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen on his face. "Of course it was," he said softly. "My mistake." He pushed off the counter and walked to the doorway. He stopped, hand on the frame, and looked back. "Just remember, Chloe, the world outside this house, it's not always as safe as it looks. It's good to have a family that knows how to keep the walls strong." Then he was gone. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. The fear had burned away, leaving something colder and harder in its place. He had built a perfect perimeter. But in that moment, I realized something fundamental. To protect a perimeter, you have to define what's inside and what's out. He had just made it clear I was inside, and the only way left for me to move was out. There's a moment when the prison door clicks shut, and you realize you were never a prisoner. You were the warden. And the only way out is to burn the place down. Silence became our new language, a dense, tactical quiet that filled the house like a gas. We spoke in pleasantries, in the necessary transactions of daily life. "Pass the salt. Your mother will be home late. The Andersons are coming for dinner Friday." But underneath, a war was being mapped. My father was no longer just monitoring me. He was stress testing my loyalty, probing for the fracture point. The dinner with the Andersons was a perfect example. A casual Friday night get-together. Mrs. Anderson, her smile still a brittle, polished thing, brought her famous peach cobbler. Her soon-to-be ex-husband, a husk of a man named Greg, nursed a scotch and avoided everyone's eyes. My father held court at the head of our dining table, the benevolent patriarch. "Greg, I was looking at those zoning bylaws for you," he said, carving the roast chicken with surgeon-like precision. "It's a mess, but I think we can navigate it. Keep that addition of yours safe from prying eyes." Greg Anderson nodded, a jerky, grateful motion. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Mac." "That's what neighbors are for," my father said, his eyes sliding to me. I was the audience for this performance. "See? I solve problems. I am indispensable." He was showing me the utility of his corruption, making it seem like a necessary, even noble service. Later, as the women cleared dessert plates, my father led Greg to the living room. I lingered in the hallway, just out of sight. "The retainer for next month, Greg." My father's voice was low, smooth as oil, given the increased complexity with the asset division. A rustle of paper, the sound of an envelope being slid across a table. "It's all there, Mac. Thank you for everything." I felt sick. I wasn't just watching a crime. I was watching a sacrament in the church of our suburb. Protection in exchange for tribute. My father was the god, and his congregation paid in cash and silence. My own rebellion had to be more than just passive witness. I needed data. I needed leverage. The ledger was the heart of it, but a photo on my phone would be useless. It would just prove I'd breached security. I needed something that couldn't be explained away. Something that connected him directly to the source. I began a new routine. Every night, after the house fell into its false slumber, I'd creep to my window. I logged patterns. The nights the black sedan appeared, every other Thursday, around 9 p.m. The nights Deputy Sweeney's cruiser did an unusually slow patrol past our house, Mondays and Wednesdays, my father's late nights at the office. I used an old disposable digital camera I dug out of a box in the basement, one that couldn't be wirelessly tracked. The grainy, zoomed-in photos I took from my dark window were pathetic, but they were proof of a pattern. My first real move was against the perimeter itself. Ashley Miller called me, crying. Her brother, the saved one, had relapsed. "My parents are freaking out," she sobbed. "They're calling your dad right now. He's the only one who can fix it." An idea, cold and sharp, formed. "Meet me at the Starbucks on Ridge Road in 20 minutes, I said. "Not the one in the Glen, the one on Ridge." Ridge Road was the boundary, the commercial strip just outside the Pinecrest Glen HOA's dominion. Ashley's eyes were red-rimmed. I bought her a chai and led her to a corner table. "Ash, listen. When my dad fixed things for your brother last year, what did he actually do?" She sniffled. "He got him into that rehab place in Arizona. He made the DUI charge disappear. He gave my dad a loan to cover it all." "A loan," I repeated. "Did your parents sign anything?" She looked confused. "I don't know, maybe. My dad said it was just between gentlemen. Your dad said the paperwork was a formality for the family trust. Why? Gentlemen. Formality. The linguistic tricks he used to soften the crime. What if I told you there was a record of it?" I whispered, leaning in. "A record that called it a service fee for juvenile expungement?" Her tears stopped. A slow, dawning horror replaced them. "What are you talking about, Chloe?" "I'm talking about my dad not being a hero. I'm talking about him being a businessman. And your family's tragedy was a business transaction." The words were acid in my mouth, but I spat them out. I needed an ally. Ashley was inside the system, a victim of it. She could be a breach. She recoiled. That's insane. Your dad is... He's Mac. He's helped half the street. Exactly, I said, my voice flat. And he has a file on every single one of them, including you. I showed her. Not the ledger. I wasn't that stupid. But the notes I'd scribbled in a code of my own on the back pages of my physics notebook. 15 Miller. J. Expungement. $7,500. Her face went ashen. Why are you showing me this? Her voice was a thin thread of fear. Because you deserve to know what the help costs. And because I can't do this alone. Do what? Stop him. She stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. Then she gathered her purse, her movements stiff. My brother needs help. Your dad is getting it for him. I don't care about your family drama, Chloe. I just want my family to be okay. She stood up. Don't talk to me about this again. The breach had failed. The system's insulation was too perfect. Fear and gratitude were stronger than truth. I watched her leave, feeling more alone than ever. That failure made me reckless. The following Thursday, I knew the black sedan would come. My father had a late client meeting. My mother was at the theater. The house was mine. I didn't go to my window. I went to the garage. My hands were ice, but my mind was a scalpel. I went straight to the workbench. I didn't touch the pegboard key. I reached underneath the lip of the bench, my fingers searching for the gray putty I'd seen him use. There it was. I dug into it and pulled out a cold, flat key, a duplicate. He'd swapped the hiding spot, thinking ahead. The drawer rolled open. The ledger and the black phone were there. This time, I took the phone. I powered it on. It had a simple passcode screen. I didn't try to guess. I had a different plan. I took the phone and the camera full of grainy photos, shoved them into my backpack, and biked to the one place I thought was beyond his reach, the downtown public library. In a study carrel in the furthest corner, I used a library computer. I didn't log into anything personal. I researched. I looked up laws about racketeering, about controlled substances. I typed in the names I knew from the ledger, adding arrest records, court cases. Most were clean, suspiciously clean. Then I made my first mistake, a dumb, panicky human mistake. I searched Robert Mackenzie Architect. The results were bland. His firm's website, a Chamber of Commerce profile. But at the bottom of the page was a link to a local news article from 12 years ago, from a paper in a city 2 states over. Local businessman questioned in fraud investigation. No charges filed. My blood went cold. I clicked it. The article was brief, vague. A real estate development scheme, questioned in connection with, released without charge. The businessman's name was different, Robert McCarthy, but the grainy, younger photo was undeniably my father. He had more hair, less smile. His eyes were the same. He had a past he'd buried under a new name and a perfect lawn. I was so absorbed, I didn't notice the time. I didn't notice the man who had sat down at the computer terminal 2 carrels over, reading a newspaper. When I finally looked up, my neck aching, I saw him. It was one of the men from the black sedan. He wasn't looking at me. He was just there. He'd followed me. The phone, it had a tracker. It was a plant. Panic, pure and electric, shot through me. I slammed the computer browser closed, yanked my backpack, and practically ran for the exit. My bike was chained outside. I fumbled with the lock, my fingers numb. A hand closed over mine. I looked up. Deputy Sweeney stood there, his cruiser idling at the curb. He wasn't smiling. "Chloe, your father's been worried sick. You didn't tell anyone you were coming downtown. It's not safe for a girl alone." This wasn't a coincidence. The man in the library was the pressure. Sweeney was the extraction. "I was just studying," I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Of course you were." He reached down and effortlessly popped my bike lock open with a small tool from his belt. "Let's get you home. Your dad's waiting." The ride in the back of the cruiser was a blur of shame and terror. Sweeney didn't speak. He just drove, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror, reflecting my own caged desperation. My father was waiting on the front porch, the warm yellow light of the house spilling out behind him, casting a long shadow across the perfect lawn. He looked calm, disappointed. Sweeney led me to the steps. "Found her at the library, Mac. All safe." "Thank you, Mark. I owe you one," and snapped it in half between his thumb and forefinger. The sound was final. "Come inside," he said, turning his back on me and walking into the house. I stood on the porch, looking at the broken pieces of plastic in my hand. I had breached the perimeter, and I had been captured effortlessly and brought back to the castle. The walls weren't just strong, they were alive. In the end, every family has its currency. Ours wasn't love. It wasn't even fear. It was information. And I was about to make my first withdrawal. He didn't yell. Robert Mackenzie didn't yell. Yelling was for weak men, for those who couldn't control a situation with silence and implication. He led me into his home office, a room I was rarely allowed in, a room of dark wood, leather, and the smell of old paper and polished brass. It was the boardroom of our family. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair opposite his massive desk. He took his own throne, steepling his fingers. The broken memory card lay between us, like a dead insect. The silence stretched, a taut wire. He was letting me marinate in my failure, in the sheer scale of his reach. The library, the deputy, the snapped card. It was a masterclass in dominance. "You wanted to know," he finally said, his voice devoid of its usual performative warmth. It was pure, clinical precision. "So, no. Pinecrest Glen is an ecosystem, a delicate one. For it to function, to be the safe, prosperous haven it is, certain services are required. I provide them. The residents provide the capital and the discretion. It's a mutual agreement. You sell drugs. You hide crimes. You blackmail our neighbors," I said, the words tasting like ash. He waved a hand, a dismissive flick. "Reductive. I provide solutions. Dr. Lee's wife is in chronic, agonizing pain. The system has failed her. I connect him to a supply. The Andersons' divorce would have bled them dry in court, torn this street apart. I facilitate a quiet, equitable dissolution. The Miller boy, he made a mistake. Should one mistake ruin a life? I gave him a second chance." He leaned forward, his blue eyes locking onto mine. "I am the safety net this town's pristine facade requires. Without me, it all crumbles into the ugly, chaotic reality you think you've discovered." He was reframing his empire as a public good, a necessary evil. And the worst part was, a sliver of it made a twisted sense. I'd seen the gratitude in their eyes, And me? My voice was a whisper. What's my service? To be the idiot daughter who smiles for the brochures? For the first time, a crack appeared. Not of anger, but of something like genuine, chilling calculation. Your role, Chloe, was to be the proof. The proof? Of the normalcy, the heart of the enterprise. He tapped the ledger cover, which now sat on his desk. You are the best and most important investment this operation has ever made. Straight A student, athlete, no record, not even a speeding ticket. You are the living, breathing evidence that Robert Mackenzie is not a criminal. He is a family man, a success. You are my ultimate alibi. The revelation was a physical blow. My entire life, the grades, the sports, the perfect behavior, hadn't been for my future. It had been for his cover. I wasn't a daughter. I was a human shield. So what now? I asked, the numbness spreading through me. You lock me in my room? Send me to some boarding school far away? He almost smiled. No, that would be an anomaly. Anomalies attract attention. Nothing changes, Chloe. You go to school, you run, you apply to college, you live your life. But I know. Yes, and that does change the calculus. He opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh, blank sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper. He set it neatly in front of him, then placed a pen beside it. It means you're no longer an unassessed asset. You are now a stakeholder, and stakeholders have responsibilities. He slid the paper and pen toward me. Write. Write what? Your statement. In your handwriting. Detail everything you think you know about my activities. The ledger. The Lees. The Andersons. The downtown meetings. All of it. My blood ran cold. Why? So you have a confession from me to use against me? No, he said, his tone implying my paranoia was childish. So I have a record of your understanding. This document stays in this room. It is our insurance policy. Mutual assured destruction. If you ever decide to go to the authorities, I will produce this. I will tell them my troubled, imaginative daughter, under immense academic pressure, perhaps experimenting with substances, constructed this elaborate fantasy in a cry for help. I'll point to your breakdown, your unauthorized trip downtown, your paranoia about the neighbors, your word against mine, against Deputy Sweeney's, against the testimony of every upstanding citizen on this street who will all swear I'm a saint. He let that hang in the air. The collapse you'd cause wouldn't be mine, Chloe. It would be your own. You'd be institutionalized, and life here would go on, with a sad, sympathetic story about the Mackenzie girl. The trap was exquisite. By writing it down, I was legitimizing his narrative. I was weaponizing my own truth against myself. And if I refuse? He leaned back. Then you force my hand. I can't have an unstable, hostile element inside the perimeter. Your mother would be heartbroken, but we'd find you the help you need. Somewhere very quiet, very far away, where you can't damage this family or this community. The choice wasn't a choice. It was an ultimatum written in my own blood. Comply and remain a prisoner in the gilded life he built, or be destroyed and painted as the madwoman. I picked up the pen. It was cold and heavy. I looked at the blank paper, a pristine field, waiting for the poison of my testimony to bloom across it. This was the transaction. My silence for my freedom. My complicity for my future. I started to write. I poured every vile detail onto the page. The codes, the names, the amounts. The look on Dr. Lee's face. The sound of the envelope sliding to Greg Anderson. The black sedan. Each word felt like a suture, closing me inside his world forever. When I finished, my hand was cramping. I slid the paper back to him. He read it slowly, meticulously. A satisfied nod. Good, clear, concise. He didn't file it away. Instead, he took a lighter from his desk, flicked it, and touched the flame to the bottom corner of the paper. I watched, stunned, as my confession curled into black ash, floating in a gossamer skeleton before crumbling into the crystal ashtray. The evidence was gone. Why? I breathed. Because the document was never the point, he said, blowing out the last tendril of smoke. The act of writing it was. You've now formally internalized the reality of this family. You've participated. Welcome to the business, Chloe. The finality of it was absolute. He hadn't just silenced me. He had recruited me. By writing that page, I had crossed a line. I was no longer an outsider looking in. I was an accomplice. The knowledge was now a shared burden, a family secret. My rebellion was over, co-opted into the system. The days that followed were a surreal pantomime of normalcy. But the axis of my world had shifted. I was now a conscious part of the machine. I saw my father not as a monster, but as a CEO. I saw the flinch in Mrs. Anderson's smile, not as pain, but as a quarterly payment made. The numbness was a protective shell. A week later, I came home to find a small, wrapped box on my bed. No card. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was a key. Not a physical key. A car key. A key fob for a brand new, sleek, silver Audi A4 parked in our driveway. The ultimate teen status symbol. The ultimate bribe. My father found me staring at it. For your future, he said, standing in the doorway, you'll need reliable transportation for college visits. Consider it an early inheritance, an investment in a valuable asset, end quote. I held the cold metal fob. It was my salary, my payoff, the tangible symbol of my transition from daughter to employee, from asset C to stakeholder C. I looked from the key to his face. The warm, crinkly-eyed smile was back, but now I knew what lay beneath it. Not love, but a cold, rational calculus. I was part of his portfolio now, and he took care of his investments. Thank you, Dad, I heard myself say. The words were automatic, part of the transaction. He nodded, the deal sealed. Dinner's at 7. Your mother's making your favorite. He left. I walked to the window, looking down at the glittering car in the driveway. It looked like freedom, but it was the heaviest chain I'd ever worn. That night at dinner, my mother chattered about an upcoming charity gala. My father discussed interest rates. I smiled and passed the salt. And as I sat there, in the heart of the beautiful, terrible machine, I realized the final, ugly truth. The perimeter wasn't around the house. It was inside me. He had won not by forcing me out, but by convincing me to lock the door myself. The transaction was complete. I had been purchased. A teenage girl discovers her beloved suburban father is the ruthless kingpin of their neighborhood, forcing her to choose between exposing his criminal empire and becoming its newest, most complicit asset. What would you have done in Chloe's place? Accepted the gilded cage to protect yourself and your family, or burned it all down, knowing you'd be destroyed in the process? And so, another story finds its place by the fireside. I hope it kept you company, whether on a long road, during a quiet evening, or in the moments you needed a story to step into. This has been a Heartlight saga, and there are always more secrets to uncover. If this journey stayed with you, if you felt the chill or the mystery settle in, I would be so grateful if you'd let me know. Leave a comment below and tell me, what part of the story lingered with you the longest? Your thoughts not only mean the world to me, but they help shape the tales I tell next. Like the video, share with someone who might like the story, and subscribe the channel Heartlight Saga. And if you're yearning for another story right now, the story doesn't have to end. I have another tale waiting for you. From my hearth to yours, thank you for listening. Until the next story begins.